allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight, at 7 p.m., we had a public hearing for a special permit application continuing from 1 Marsh Meadow Lane. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Okay, J.R., you're recusing yourself. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we've heard from the applicant, and he has had a request to continue this public hearing until February 28th at 7:15 p.m. So I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to February 28th, 7:15.
Motion to continue the public hearing to February 28th at 7 p.m.?
7:15.
7:15.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Roll call, don't have to do a roll call? No?
No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the special permit has been continued. If anyone's here for that, it will be continued to February 28th at 7:15 p.m. Okay. So now I'm going to go into, I hate to do this to people, but we're going to go into executive session right now, and then I need to clear the room. So, and then when, let me move it first before I clear the room. So I move that the select board, oh, can you get JR again?
Yep, he's right
Yeah,
there.
come on in. I move that the select board enter into executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel, specifically the police chief and deputy police chief, because an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of this body. Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Okay, I need to do a roll call vote for this. J.R. Colby,
Yes.
Dana Packer,
Yes.
Jerry Heavy,
Yes.
Jeff Walker,
Yes.
and Alicia Greco votes yes. Okay, this meeting will reconvene at the conclusion of executive session. There's also a second executive session, so I move that the select board enter into executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to affirm the discussion and vote taken on November 30th, 2022, relative to the matter of the Department of Environmental Protection.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. Environmental Protection in Cricket Lane LLC, SOC 050, superseding order of conditions 050-1355 for Pearson Drive, because an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of this body. Is there a second?
Second.
A roll call vote. J.R. Colby,
Yes.
Dana Packer,
Yes.
Jerry Heavy,
Yes.
Jeff Walker,
Jeff Walker, yes.
Alicia Greco votes yes.
You can
Okay,
shut.
this meeting will reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session. There's only 2 items that we have before we get to the discussion. Is Tim here? I didn't see. Oh, there's
He is here. He was here.
Okay,
yeah.
so we have a grant for the removal of the Larkin Road Dam for $450,000.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion to accept, I'm sorry.
Motion to accept. Second.
Second, okay, discussion. Tracy, do you want to explain a little bit about the grant?
It's just an additional piece of grant funding. You've had 3 or 4 reported to you, so we're.
What are we at a total? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't. I'd have to pull my
Around
paperwork.
like a little over.
We got one I know of 70,000. Yeah, it's got to be getting close to 600,000. We're not done yet, but we've got a great team with Noah and the Commonwealth. What, Jeff? What's their
DMF.
DMF? Thank you. Division of Marine Fisheries. Thank you. So.
Okay, so we could look for more grant money. That's wonderful.
Yep, we're still got a couple out there.
Great. Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We have to review and approve the fiscal year '23 appointment for Patty Fisher. She's going to replace Chief Lucy on the Municipal Vulnerability Task Force.
Motion to appoint.
Second.
Any discussion?
Are we supposed to hear what you're saying? Because if so, it's got to be a little louder.
Okay. We just made a motion to appoint the new police chief, Patty Fisher, to the Municipal Vulnerability Task Force.
You
And
know
we
I
had a
missed you,
second.
Dave.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So that's done. So next on the agenda, which is why I think most people are here, is to talk about the trees on Newman Road. So I'm going to ask Tim Lamprey, our tree warden, to come up and explain to the town, or explain to the board, actually.
Good evening. For people who might not know, my name's Tim Lamprey. I'm the tree warden for the town of Newbury. You should have a packet that shows the consultant that was hired to look at the trees on Newman Road. There's the contested trees, there's 8 of them, roughly from the fence that is the old entrance to the field, and then it goes down towards where the existing parking lot is now. So I had been watching those for about 5 years, and finally looked at them and said, yeah, these really do need to come down. And I kind of knew that there was going to be people who weren't going to be happy with it, but unfortunately, they just have lived their useful life. The biggest issue, I think, in that area is, if you might even be able to see it on some of the photos that are included there, but some of those trees are within inches of the paving that was there. Most of those trees were planted roughly 95 years ago, from what I understand. And it was a dirt road, and of course, the tree roots could get underneath the dirt road and take up the water and the nutrients they needed. Once the road got paved, then in some cases, 99% of the root system is under the road. So that had a dire impact on the trees. So I think the hardest part's going to be that trying to replace trees in that area, because it's such a small area to do it, and you know what we could plant there. One of the big issues in my mind is how are we going to water them, because there's no water there. It's not like there's fire hydrants that you can open and get water and water any new trees that are there. But the report that you got on there from the consultant basically agrees and said that, you know, you should take these down. The vast majority of them are hollow, and there's only a small area around just under the bark, which is what's allowing water and available nutrients to go up there and make the trees leaf out. But, you know, they're going to be a big problem. And it's, out of curiosity, I had taken a look on Googled trees that fell in Massachusetts and killed people. And there are, it looks to be one like every 6 months. And there was one in 2016 in Abington, which I remember this one. It was 2 people, they were driving, I believe it was a BMW, and driving down a street in Abington. The couple were from Whitman. Tree fell, just out of the blue, it just fell and crushed the car and killed both of them. Another one in 2017 in Andover, up near the state forest in Andover, where the tree, they were on 125, that fell, and it killed the wife in the car, and the husband wound up going to the hospital. Just recently, there was one up in Sunapee, where a woman was killed in that last big rain and windstorm that we had. Tree came down on her car and crushed the car. And the one I remember most is up in Epping, New Hampshire. Woman training for a marathon, running on the rail trail. All of a sudden, she gets knocked over by what she thought was a tree limb, actually a tree. And I got the phone call on that, and the phone call was, "Daddy, I'm in an ambulance and going to the hospital." And she had a gash in her leg, which just missed, I believe that's the femoral artery in her leg, and then broke her leg. So she had to have the metal rod put in her leg. And that's why, seeing what she had to go through, I don't really want anybody in the town of Newbury to have to go through that. So it's just, the trees are dangerous. People may not think so. I don't know how many people have actually gone out and physically looked at the trees to see the condition that they're in. I know there was a picture that was in the Daily News. I don't know how old the picture was, but it did make the trees look fairly nice. But once you get out there and start looking, it's become an issue there. And, you know, the outcome is that I tell people, you know, Newbury is blessed to have a lot of nice old trees, and Newbury is cursed to have a lot of old trees, because there's so many. Even with that hearing, the 8 trees that people are concerned about, there are a myriad of other trees in town that are on that same public hearing that have to come down. A lot of them are ash trees. The emerald ash borer has gotten into them, and it's just devastating ash trees throughout the town. And that started up probably about 4 years ago. It really got into trees in town. But there's other trees that are just old. And then we've also got National Grid had a public hearing for taking down 72 trees, I think it is, along the town's right of way. And then some of those, I think it was 40 that are town trees, and then the others are on private property that they want to take down because of the issues with power outages. And the state gets on their case if there's X number of outages in a year on that. So they have to get some of the stuff either cut back or removed. I went out with them, looked at it. But the issue on Newman Road, I believe it's really in the best interest of the town to get those down before somebody gets hurt and replant trees where we can. There's going to be some areas where it might not be possible to plant, but I thought that we might be able to get the trustees to plant some trees on, call it their side of that stone wall that's there, and see if that would, you know, get some, call it new trees in there. But the trees that are there now, being so close to the road, that's just what's doing the trees in. And if you drive through town, you'll see it that way. So that's the issue. I think the report speaks for itself on what really needs to be done. So, any questions?
Thank you, Tim. Jerry?
I was out there looking at the trees today, and I noticed, I saw the trees with the big orange or red X
Yep.
and your sign, but I also noticed trees that had a blue line,
Yep.
not an X. What's the meaning of the blue line?
Blue is pruning.
Okay.
So, the unfortunate thing is in Massachusetts, if you're going to prune trees, you still have to have a public hearing on it, which that just holds things up. I don't know if there's any way, maybe town council can look into it to see if there's any way to get around that in some way, shape, or
I don't
form,
think
so
there
we
is.
can get the truck out there and start pruning up stuff. It would save a lot of trees if we could get ahead on the pruning, because that's the issue on a lot of trees. A branch breaks off, it falls onto the ground, and then what was it? I don't know how many years ago it was, but the budget for tree removal, I think, was $2,500. And then once the Pacheco law went into effect, which is prevailing wage, that might be one tree. And so it's very difficult to do that. Now we're fortunate that we've got a budget that will help to pay for taking down additional trees. This stuff, for instance, down the far end of Newman Road, closer to where High Road, there's electrical wires that come in and
The
there's
ones
trees
that
in
are all
there.
forked through the wires.
Yeah, and our guys don't have the training for taking those down. You have to very specifically have the training. So that would have to go out to bid, to have those trees even pruned. So we'll be able to take care of that. And like I said, there's trees in other parts of town that are in sad shape that have to come down, but that's what's going on. Orange is removal, blue is pruning.
And the report makes reference or uses the word leader. I assume that that's, the leader is a branch.
The leader is you could call it the trunk,
Okay.
and then trunk comes up, branches come out. Some of those are referred to as leaders,
Okay.
and some of those have broken off. Some-
They're basically your larger branches.
Right, yeah,
Yeah,
as opposed to when you get really up the top of the tree and you've got a lot of smaller branches. But
Okay.
it's the main, let's call it the structure of the tree,
Okay.
is the easiest way.
Vertical stuff.
Hmm?
Kind of the vertical stuff as opposed to the horizontal stuff.
Yeah.
And is there any plan to replant? Is there you've mentioned it, but is there a set plan and,
There isn't a set plan because we're gonna have to look at what trees we could get to plant in those areas where there's enough setback off the road. They wouldn't be trees as big as what's there now. First of all, the vast majority of the maples there are Norway maples, and those are on the invasive plant list in Massachusetts, and for that matter, also in New England. You can't plant them anymore. So,
do you have any idea what might be available?
I don't know because I haven't gotten the list yet. I've got calls into different wholesalers to see what they can do. The issue is gonna be, okay, we can plant them, how do we keep them watered that first year? Because if there was fire hydrants down there, it'd probably be easier. I found out from the consultant that there are some of the bigger tree services that have, call it subdivisions of what they do, that will plant trees and then they have water wagons, call it, to come back and water stuff. I haven't looked at what the cost of that is. That might be prohibitive. It's hard to tell,
What
but
age, sorry, Jerry,
That's okay, go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Jump in. What age or size sapling would lend itself best to the conditions there, kind of having to fend for itself?
I wouldn't recommend this, but if you think of something on the size of like a crabapple tree, but there are a lot of natives that could go in there that might survive. As far as maples go.
I guess my question was, will a sapling this big fend for itself there in a fresh hole better than a, say, like a
No,
6-foot tree?
I think if you get the root system out on an 8 to 10 foot tree, that would be the best thing to replace it with. It's less likely to, call it, get damaged, because it's gonna have its own structural root system will get out into the soil relatively quickly, whereas if you put a sapling in, then there's all the follow-up on pruning it so that you don't get multi-leaders coming out on each side, and then you have a structurally weaker tree that's gonna start snapping off again. So that's the issue, is trying to, I haven't gone out there with a shovel and started digging holes to see what the soil is like to know what can go in there.
Right.
We have funds for doing it in town, to plant trees, and we could tap into that. It's just, it's a particularly difficult area getting further back where the road was paved almost up to the trees. And I think in the long run, that's probably what did them all in, was just they couldn't get the water, they couldn't get the nutrients, and then anything that happened to them with a branch snapping off or something, you know, the rot got in there. The day I went out with a consultant to show him what was going on, it was a rainy day, fairly rainy, and we got to look at the trees, and you could see this foam down near the tree, which means basically the tree is hollow, and the water's running down in and just working its way out through any little breaks in the bark. So, like I said, that's my biggest fear, is that those trees having something come down on somebody. It's not good.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Are we just talking about these 8 trees tonight? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Because I also went down there, and I counted 27 trees total along Newman Road.
Yeah.
And they were like the vertical lines, the X's.
Yeah.
Some had white signs on them that you can't read anymore. Is that something that is gonna, I mean, is all those 27 trees gonna
If they,
eventually be
if they,
cut down?
if they have the orange X on them, those are trees marked for coming down. There's some that are down near, I want to say maybe somewhere between the street addresses of 4 and 14 that, there's one, when I first went out to look, one further down closest to the lower green. And that tree definitely would have to come down. In the time it took to get everything together for the public hearing and for me to come back and post the notices, there was a major branch that had fallen off that tree in a windstorm. So anything with an orange would come down, anything with a blue would be pruned. So,
When is that, when would that, what kind of pacing?
well,
are we
that can
talking
happen
about?
anytime now. Talking with James on the highway department has the truck to go out and do the pruning and removal. Right now, I think they're playing catch up on paving, and I think they're almost done with that. And they can go back and do that stuff all winter. If it's not snowing, they can take the truck out and stop pruning, removing. And I mean, it's not just on Newman Road where there's a lot of trees. There's, I think, 12 on Boston Road, which are ash trees. There's one on Coleman Road, but looking at that tree, Coleman Road's gonna be another one we're gonna have to look and see what we can take out of there before it falls.
But right now, we're only talking about Newman
We're only
Road.
talking about those,
Have you had public hearings on the other ones yet?
on everything, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was on the 31st, I believe.
Yeah, it was a Halloween.
Yeah, and so the other trees, on Boston Road, Coleman Road, Parker Street, Low Street, Plumbers Lane, Austin Lane, and then a lot of those trees from, on Newman Road.
Okay, so, but tonight, we're only gonna be
You're only
talking about.
concerned with those 8, that's what was appealed.
Okay,
Was those 8 trees that are abutting the field where the land is owned by the trustees of the reservation.
yes. Okay, so what is to get back to Dana's question, because I went down there and I looked at it myself, and there's a white, looks like a white piece of paper in a, I don't know if it's in a plastic thing that's
Yeah,
posted
it's
to
a,
some of
it's a
them. What's
posting
that?
that's required by state law to be put onto the trees that are either gonna be pruned or,
Okay,
and it's like that.
yeah,
And then the only way to get it to, call it survive out there,
but
Yes.
there's plastic sheeting of some
yeah,
sort.
it's
yeah.
just like a regular sheet like
Yeah.
that, and this goes in there, and then it's stapled onto the tree so
Okay.
that people know which ones, and on the particular trees that I was putting a sign on, I took a highlighter, a yellow highlighter, and highlighted that particular tree on there, so it would say whether it was to be removed or to be pruned, and that, like I said, that starts, not quite down to where the lower green is, but, and then all the way down, but it's those 8 particular trees from where the swinging gate is down to just about where the land starts to rise up before the parking lot. So it's those 8 trees that are the trees that this is concerned over.
Okay, any other questions?
Where does the wood go?
If it's ash, it's got to be disposed of because of emerald ash borer. A lot of times, once the truck is out there, it doesn't take long for somebody to come up and say, can I have that wood?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
okay, just
people,
curious.
people will take it, and it just makes it easier. I know there's been suggestions in the past that, you know, the wood should be taken someplace in town and stored, and then people could come and get it, but I don't see what the logistics of that would happen, because you'd have to have somebody there, you'd have to make sure it's not, let's say, somebody who's selling firewood, and, if I can get this for free, then I, and if you cut it, and somebody's there immediately saying, I'll take all this stuff, most people don't want to take the whole trunk of the tree, but the branches and stuff like that, the bigger stuff people will take. And
But what's the rule with the ash, with the emerald ash borer? Can they
it's to
take it?
prevent the spread.
No, I know, but can they take it or not? Because of-
No.
No.
Yeah,
No.
Not
it's-
supposed to.
yeah,
No.
it's just it's gotta be burned, it's gotta be incinerated somehow, is what I think,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Okay, any further questions, Jeff? Jerry? JR?
Maybe just some comments as opposed to
You
questions?
wanna hear from the public first, or you wanna
Sure,
go first?
no, sure.
Dana?
Nothing further right now, no.
You've answered all my questions too for now,
Okay.
so I'm gonna ask,
Yeah, and then if you've got more questions, I can walk from there back up.
yeah, have a seat right up there. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone from the audience would like to come up and speak? Come on. Yeah, come on up.
Hi, Lon Hochmeister, 281 High Road. A couple of years ago, a bunch of us, Jim and some other people, raised some money to buy that property next to the lower green. And we were able to get a grant for $10,000, bought 25 trees. That basically the distribution of the types mimicked Old Town Hill. So we looked at what was up there, bought that, planted them and made them look kind of random out here. Watered them for about a year and a half, twice a week unless it rained, and then maybe only once a week. So we watched the rain and so on. 25 trees survived. They were about 10, maybe 12 feet tall, maybe a little longer than that. Root ball was like this. That $10,000 was installed. The root ball was like from me to you, yeah, right.
Big
And
tree.
but they did well. We lost one this year in the drought, and either that or somebody was trying to kill the weeds around it and sprayed something on it, because it died in like 3 weeks. It wasn't even brown, but it's one of the pines. But there's maples, pines, things like that. So, okay, so I'm just saying that it's possible to plant these things. It is possible to water 'em. Maybe you'd have to pay somebody to water 'em. I don't know. But if you water them, they'll survive. These things it was amazing. Anyway, so I was listening to Tim, and my thought on this would be, I didn't know there was a plan. Maybe because I didn't go to the hearings or something like that, but or the public things. But the plan, in my opinion, should be two parts. Part one: these are the trees we've targeted. These are going to be taken out. These are going to be pruned. Part two: here's our plan for replacing them. And the selectmen or select board should approve both parts. So 5 years down the line, there aren't a bunch of little dead sticks this tall where they got put in the water. In other words, if you're going to plan taking them down, plan replacing them. So you can get public opinion on that too.
Thank you.
And it solve the problem, because
Yeah.
like Tim was saying, we don't know what we're going to put back. Well, then don't take them out.
Thank you.
Okay.
David?
David Powell, 5 Kent Way. I know some of you on the board. For those of you who don't know me, I lived here from 91 till 2014, then made the great mistake of going to Newburyport. And now I'm back living across the street. I am the closest neighbor to Town Hall, quote unquote. And also I have to confess, and I'll take this off, that I don't claim sole responsibility, but the reason we're here doing this is because I sent you a letter following what Mass state law requires. I'd be interested to know, because frankly I could hear very little of what Tim said. You had a report. Who made the report and what did it say? Could you,
Yeah.
some of you, briefly share with all of us what it said?
Sure, absolutely. Tim,
Prepared by, right here.
Yeah, just, he made a request of James MacArthur, which is an ISA certified arborist. He has a number, any number, 7574A. He did a tree assessment report for the trees on Newman Road. And there's an executive summary here, and would you like me to read it aloud? It's only,
Well, I'll ask everyone here.
do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear it? Okay.
Would you like
And
to
then-
follow along while she's reading?
Yeah.
Here you go.
Thank you, Dana. And then we have findings, too. So, the executive summary is there are 8 Norway maples, Acer, my Latin is not very good, plantainoids, located on the side of Newman Road bordering the Trustees of Reservation, Old Town Hill property in Newbury, Mass. The trees were assessed by James MacArthur on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. Using the methods described in this report and the results of the examination of these 8 trees, it is my professional opinion that all 8 trees be removed. Norway maples are an invasive species in Massachusetts, and all 8 of these trees are in varying stages of severe decline and present a high-risk potential to the traveling public along Newman Road. So the assignment was the Professional Environmental Services, LLC, was contracted by Tim Lamprey, Town of Newbury Tree Warden, to provide an independent tree risk assessment for 8 Norway maples growing on the edge of Newman Road. Based on conversation with Tim Lamprey, the following was agreed to by both parties. 1, perform a Level 2 basic visual assessment as defined in the International Society Arboriculture's ISA's Best Management Practices for Tree Risk Assessment and the ANSI A300 Part 9 Standard for Tree Risk Assessment. And 2, provide a written report that documents the level of risk based on tree and site conditions observed and discussed at the time of the inspection. So the purpose of this report is to provide information on the assessment of the 8 trees and the site conditions of the municipal shade trees along the edge of Newman Road, Town of Newbury, to determine the level of risk of the 8 Norway maples located there, and each marked with the red X and posted for removal by the Newbury Tree Warden. This report is the property of the Town of Newbury. It may only be used for the purpose of making decisions regarding risk mitigation involving these 8 Norway maples. Then he has findings. In the following report findings, Professional Environmental Services, LLC, will provide some overall individual tree observations and then apply those observations to each individual tree tagged and a tree number assigned along with the individual tree observations and recommendations. The 8 Norway maple trees are located along the green space between the paved surface of Newman Road and a field stone wall that is the property line of the Trustees of Reservation's Old Town Hill Reservation. These trees are greater than 60 years old and are in serious decline. They are in varying degrees of decline, ranging from extensive heart rot with only 1 live limb supporting vegetation to trees with several live limbs and leaders that exhibit trunk and branch cavities, fruiting bodies, bark beetle damage, broken and dead branches, and seams from previous lightning and other weather condition stress fractures. Some of the trees have girdling roots and others are covered in poison ivy. The trees were risk assessed in conformance with the Tree Risk Assessment Protocol established by the International Society of Arboriculture, based on the ANSI A300 Part 9 Tree Risk Assessment Standards. The key goal is to minimize target potential, such as structures, pool deck, pool, and any place where a human interface may occur. Each tree was assessed, and the individual findings, tree photos, and recommended remediation action are listed separately in the following findings. They are listed by tree number, species name, diameter, at breast height, condition, target potential, and recommendation. So then we go
Thank you.
through all of the trees.
No.
I'm not gonna go through, I mean, we'll might have a discussion at the board level, going tree by tree, but I don't think we need to do that right now.
No, I think that's fine, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
So do you have any other questions, David?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now we know who did it and what the recommendation is, and the recommendation seems to be that he thinks that all of the, all 8 should be removed, whereas I think there were not, if I remember correctly, not 8, but less than that, which were originally cited for total removal. Some of them were cited for limbing, meaning pruning, let's call it.
Well, there's
Okay.
more, have you been, you must have been down there.
Yeah.
I went down there yesterday, and there's a lot of trees that are marked.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
looks as if the ones that are, as Tim explained, I don't know if you heard him, the ones that have a blue line on them.
Yeah, no,
those
I,
are pruned.
right, yeah.
And the ones that have a red X, and there are
Yeah.
8 of them, need to come down. Let me ask Tim to clarify that. Tim, are there only 8 trees that are marked to come down?
Well, in that section that abuts the land of the trustees, there's 8 that start from roughly where that metal gate is,
Yep,
down towards where the existing parking lot is now. So there's 8 trees in a row.
okay, and then the additional trees that are marked for removal are not abutting, and nobody has,
Correct.
what's appealed, that's the word,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, so there are more than 8 trees slated to come down.
Right, I think, you know, our terminology here is getting a little confused, but let's go on. I'd like to kind of move on a little
Okay.
to essentially, here we have a situation where a process is ongoing of having trees maintained in the town. That's the job of the tree warden, all right? But there doesn't seem to be part of a process beyond that to in fact involve people in the town. And this is why really we're here, because what happened was suddenly these notices appeared in the newspaper. What you were inquiring about earlier, by the way, that was posted on those trees was a version of what appeared in the newspaper, which was fine, which was the first thing that I knew, because Tim had mentioned earlier, I think I heard, one or two things I heard was he said he'd been watching the trees for 5 years. Well, I've been the property steward volunteer at Old Town Hill for 35 years. And frankly, watching those trees, I understand that, yes, many of them are diseased and that many of them need some attention, but I found the proposal to remove so many to be a very radical proposal, which, among other things, when the public hearing was held in this very room, there was no discussion of replacement. There was no discussion of a 2-part plan, which is gentleman there just mentioned, which I think is part of what we need to do, frankly. And so I think what we're looking at is we're looking at one of the most iconic places in terms of roads and trees in the town. Probably a more iconic one might be the Spencer Pierce Little Avenue, because it's complete and two-sided and quite remarkable, but that's on private land. But these trees are on public land, and I think anybody who is a regular visitor to Old Town Hill has their own particular image of those trees. And so the notion of thinking of them being removed is pretty radical, I think, for a lot of people. I would suggest that why we're in this situation is not just because David Powell went and saw a notice and followed the rules and wrote the letter, because there wouldn't be these folks here tonight. Because I studiously only encouraged 1 or 2 people to see what they thought. Okay, so I understand this is not the first time there's been an issue about concern about proposals to bring trees down. I think a similar thing happened with trees on Cottage Road.
Yes.
And so I think this points to the fact that we're lacking a process to do that. Okay, in other words, a process to find out whether something is contentious or not. In many cases, that will not be the case, but in this case, clearly it is. And I think what it has shown up is that we lack any kind of feedback device, specifically something like a tree committee or a tree commission, which would be responsible, among other things, for not only planning something in terms of what the town is going to do, not only with removal, but also with replacement, which I think is extremely important. In this case, replacement provides, frankly, some really tough problems, because if you start replacing those trees, you are going, among other things, to undermine the foundation of the wall that runs along that field, the name of which, by the way, for all of you to know, is the Bushy Pasture, named for the original owner of the land who gave it to the trustees. So I would suggest very much that it would be a good idea if the select board considered beginning to structure something like a tree committee or a tree commission that would work with the tree warden, that would work in a situation like this. For example, they might be the people who commission the second opinion and work with an individual to do that, rather than put the tree warden in a position which he sort of has to hire his own critic, in a sense, which is not a very good idea. So that's one of the things. I think it also would create a situation where someone, I think it was Dana, asked whether what happened to the wood. And one of the things it seems to me is that given the list of total trees which are on the current plan, there's enough, probably enough maple anyway, to actually offer that to somebody who's in the firewood business and make some money to put into a fund to in fact pay for some of the kind of replacement activities which would have to go on. So this is all part, I think, of a plan that we need to have. I think also that another thing which ties into this, and I hate to expand it too far, but I think it's part of the deal. I originally sent my letter, to you and to the planning board. And I sent it to the planning board by a mistaken impression that we had a list of scenic roads in Newbury. Well, we do have one which is actually nationally listed, which is Route 1A, right?
Yeah.
But we do not, as far as I'm aware, as a town, have a list of scenic roads. If we did have such a list that was proposed by a group charged to do that and then approved by the select board, then the planning board would become custodians of what shall I say, implementing the rules that would come with that, okay? Because it would have to be done according to a state structure, basically, to make it valid. So I'm suggesting that these two things should go together. The achievement of some kind of tree body that would be advisory, and also the whole idea of scenic roads, because if you then team those two things together, then you have a series of checks and balances, which I think would not, if they were in place now, would mean we probably wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't probably be going on and on about this, okay?
Well, I don't know about that, because I think, and I don't know, maybe Tim, you can correct me, but I think what you did, the process and that you followed, isn't that in Massachusetts general laws?
Yes, everything that I have done is under Mass General Law.
Yeah.
When there was a question, or call it I'm trying to think of the correct term, an appeal, so to speak. If you've noticed, none of those trees have been touched unless there was a branch that fell during a storm or something like that. State law says that puts a hold on that until the selectmen make the decision.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the tree warden is the only one in Massachusetts, and who is the tree warden in a particular town, can make the decision as to whether a tree has to come down. You have a committee that makes a recommendation, and that's fine, but ultimately it's the tree warden who makes that decision as to whether a tree comes down. That's state law. So we followed state law on doing the ads in the daily news, posting the notices on the trees. The notices were on the trees 3 weeks prior to, even though state law says 7 days before the hearing. So there was plenty of notice if people went by and saw that they would know that there was a public hearing on it. The public hearing in and of itself was very sparsely attended. So but it's just a case of looking at those particular trees and saying, okay, this is what needs to be done. And then looking at other trees in town and seeing which ones. I mean, I get phone calls, I get through the tree warden email, get things coming in on that. Sometimes multiple ones a week. Some weeks there's nothing. But I try and get out, look at the trees, make sure that A, they're town trees, and if they're town trees, if they would need to be pruned or need to be removed, but then a list starts being made about taking down any trees or pruning any trees, we have to have that public hearing, so.
Yeah. And this is the appeal process for the public hearing.
Exactly.
Thank you, thank you. Okay.
Okay, I have a couple of documents for you which are from DCR, one of which is entitled Tree Boards and Committees. There's also a lot of information on the
Thank you.
DCR website, specifically about how to go about developing a tree commission or board. Okay, and this also came with it because it's one of the
Okay.
things at the bottom there. I'm not suggesting that Tim did anything or the town has condoned doing anything that was not properly done. All I'm suggesting is that I would hope would be a recognition that certain areas of the town, the upper green, the lower green, etc., are very sensitive areas publicly. And so when you're proposing to do something to them, to just march forward and stick up a notice is perhaps not the coolest way to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's how come I'm here, and
Thank you.
that's how come I did the process that I've
Oh,
involved
the
you in.
process is working.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yep, come on up.
Good evening.
Hi.
Jessica Brown, 275 High Road. I speak on behalf of myself, but also my husband, Brent Mitchell, who can't be here tonight. I also brought this to share, but our friend David Powell is much more organized and had copies for each of you. I would really strongly like to reinforce what David has said about creating some kind of mechanism like a tree committee that would be a mechanism for public input, for transparency, and for a higher bar than just meeting the, there's no disputing, as he says, whether the rules and legal pieces of this process have been met. But is that really the bar that we're aiming for, or are we aiming for a bar that ensures that special landscape features, like the ones he described, are maintained in their best possible way? And David invoked for us the image not just of the trees along Newman Road, but the ones at Spencer Pierce Little Farm. That's a landscape feature, an alley that is unique to our town. And if we could look a little more holistically, not just at individual trees, but at landscapes and at some of the special landscapes like the ones he named, that might be a good scope for a tree committee. Perhaps they can't advise on everywhere, but they could look at a few special places. And I think that would give us a better process and probably bring down the temperature a little bit when these proposals come up. The last time I stood here talking to you was 13 or 14 months ago when a tree came down on Cottage Road after several were proposed. We were informed that there was a plan to replant. We have not been updated at all. We see no tree coming in. There may well be a plan, but again, the mechanism for communication on that is not perhaps as strong as it could be. Reports like this, if a tree committee were there, we could have a few members of the community who are as informed as the tree warden and the select board on these details and could help advocate for the decisions. But importantly also to look at the two parts here, which is not just the tree removal, but also the planting going forward. And again, I think if we can bring this, you know, almost up a little level, not just to the individual trees, but looking at the landscape as a whole. We have a very special landscape in Newbury, but if we lose those features,
Right.
those landscape features, we lose some of that special quality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up, Fred.
Next slide out this side. Just a couple of points.
Careful.
I may fall down on it.
Yep.
Fred Thurlow, 26 Marsh Avenue in Newbury.
Hi, Fred.
Hi, how are you? Number one, and the biggest point I have here is, Newbury has a history of taking trees down and not removing the stumps. And if we don't remove the stumps, we're not going to have a good time replanting. So make sure when the trees are removed, the stumps go too. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Tim was curious about what would grow there and what would be good there. Now, the Garishes have planted in front of their houses there a whole row of swamp maples, red maples, and they look good. Got them planted way too close together, but other than that, they look good, and they would go there fine. You know, Norway maples are considered an invasive species, but they're a nice-looking tree, and they last a long time. Ash trees, on the other hand, they're also an invasive species. They were brought in here by the state after Hurricane Carol in 1954. They were not here before then. So, you know, invasive, not invasive, that doesn't bother me too much, because Norway maples are a nice-looking tree. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Fred.
Careful. Come on up.
Jim Roy, 88 Pine Island Road. We're here with my wife, Jan. Every item on my list has already been addressed by previous speakers.
Thank
So
you.
I'm not going to bore you all by going on it.
Thank you. We
But I
appreciate
do
that.
think the tree committee situation and idea is absolutely essential, especially for places that are specifically exceptional.
Sensitive, yes.
And we have got to be careful here. You know, driving down that road, Newman Road, and seeing all those big X's on the trees, man, that was a depressant. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people felt the same way, and we can't be too reckless when we're dealing with this stuff. And, you know, I don't like the idea of non-professional people going up and trimming stuff that they really don't have the expertise to do. Now, I think a tree committee would be a real help, both the DPW and the tree warden, who probably would rather they didn't exist. But I think it's the best way to go forward here that would appease the concerns you've heard tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Not from Newbury. Just waiting to go last. My name's Peter Pinciero. I work for the trustees of reservations. I'm the director at the Crane Estate over in Ipswich, and I've been associated with Old Town Hill for probably 40 years, so even longer than David Powell, not as long as a Newbury resident. So I won't rehash. I mean, I'm very familiar with Norway maples. They are invasive. These trees are at the end of their lifespan. We've got hundreds of them at Crane, about the same age, and they're all failing. But I did want to share with you, and I'm really supportive of where the conversation has gone. But tonight we've learned the hard way as an organization over the years in terms of making dramatic changes to an iconic landscape without really socializing it in our communities. And if any of you are familiar with Appleton Farm, we we literally did the same thing at the main entrance to Appleton Farm with an avenue of Norway maples, and over on the other side of the farm at Appleton Farms grass rides. Again, failing trees. We clear cut them, but we had an internal and an external process in terms of letting the public and our visitors know what the trajectory was for those trees, and in fact we tried to phase it, and I would encourage the town to phase the removal of trees to the extent that it's possible, because there are clearly some dangerous trees on Newman Road. But I'd suggest, just because that landscape is just so iconic and it draws so many walkers and cyclists. I mean, you all recreate there, so you know what I'm talking about. I think it is important to be deliberate and to bring more people into the conversation and to have a renewal plan. So we had a substantial budget, and we got a lot of gifts actually at Appleton in the form of trees. And I think we planted lindens and maples and native trees to almost immediately replace the trees that came down. And that's why I would suggest a phase approach, perhaps doing some pruning to the extent that we can, because I know a lot of those trees are leaning over the field, and selectively taking out maybe over a 3 to 5 year period and plant in between, just to show folks that you've got a well thought out process. And I would I'll offer that the trustees would love to participate, particularly in an effort to analyze alternatives or other plants. We've got a network of volunteers in Newbury and on the North Shore that I'm sure could help water new trees, or at least make sure the tree bags were filled. So we'd love to consult on it, because I think there probably are some native plants that probably could survive in that strip between the wall and the roadway. I mean, clearly the Norways did pretty well over all this time. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Is there anyone else? Anyone else want to come up? Come on up.
Rachel Holland, 26 Old Raleigh Road. Just a quick question, you brought up about 27 trees possibly coming down?
Yeah.
And I know, I don't exactly know how it works with the
You
meeting. It
said
sounds like
marked or coming down, Dana?
27 trees either had an X, a blue line, or a note taped to it. And I kind of agree. It was overwhelming, driving down that road and seeing the way that they were labeled, and it got my attention. But I counted 27 of them.
But not all 27 are going to come down. Some are going to be pruned.
Right, so 27 trees on that road are to be affected in a sense. And I think to the point, I know the meeting has specifically been spotted for the 8, which are great, because I understand they are really fairly iconic because of their location on the wall and across the field there, and it's truly picturesque. And 2, I believe Betsy over here, she talked, what's that?
Jessica.
That we're talking about almost something as a landscape and environmental in that sense. And as someone who's been a horticulturalist and done some of the work that's historical as well, I wonder about like 27 trees. I know we're thinking about those 8. I don't know if we do have the power to kind of put the pause on this, because we are talking about something quite large, and this road itself being deeply impacted. So as people come down, they're like, well, why did we get why they saved those, but now we have this huge gap going on. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to put a pause on all of this now, if we have to fill out more paperwork. Of course, I look at someone else to fill out the paperwork. But if that's something that could happen, maybe, and we could actually see how this road, this environment, and this vista and all of that is going to be impacted.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Okay. Tim?
To address the last question about putting a pause on all of them, what state law says, any, call it, questioning of a particular tree to be removed has to be presented before the meeting or at the meeting. So after that, pretty much, it should go the way it is going now. If Fred brought up the question about stumps, the only way we could do that would be to appropriate the money to buy a stump grinder for the town. I'm not sure what the cost of that is. The other thing that may be coming up for replacement is the chipper that the town has. But at this point, I think that there was questions about the upper green and the lower green and replacing trees, and people may not know that there was an advisory board that has come up with plans for the upper green and the lower green. We're due to put down probably in the spring another application of lime and gypsum on the upper green to improve the drainage and to make for a better environment there. Is a plan in effect for replacing, for want of a better term, let's call it the Christmas tree, with a white spruce. We were looking at one about 20 feet in height. We had a quote of $10,000 to replace that one, but that was blue spruce, which isn't in the trees as a native, which is what we're trying to address up there. And then once we get that in place, then there was another tree that came down that's closer to the street. And, you know, stumps have to be ground out there and then another tree put back in. All depends on what's available to do this. As ironic as it sounds, a lot of wholesale nurseries don't carry natives in any quantities except for maybe small trees. But this, from being in the business for 38 years, there are connections with people who do have some of this stuff, just waiting to see what they're going to have available for the spring to replace some of this stuff. So lower green, upper green, both come under that category of what the town would, be able to replace. Was talk about the scenic highway of 1A. That's a state road, and so the state, if someone calls me and says, oh, I live on High Road and I've got a tree that has a problem, I tell them, well, you're going to have to talk with Mass DOT about that because the town of Newbury can't do anything on it.
Right.
Same way with Spencer Pierce Little Farm, that's privately owned, and whatever work they have done there, that is something that is they're doing, so to speak.
So Cottage Road, can we go back for a second? I remember when we took down and we trimmed some and we took down, I don't know, maybe one or two of them, but
Yeah.
there was construction going on at that time.
Right,
So
and
the
there's another tree that is gonna go in. The lady who, I think it's number 4, and the tree was taken down in front of her house. And she's going to agree to pay for putting a tree back in to replace the one that was cut down.
Okay,
But the construction equipment keeps running up over where she's planted the little garden out front. And she said, well, can I wait until the construction gets to the point where I don't have to worry about a truck running over a tree? And I
Right.
said, that's fine. I'd
Right.
much rather have a tree have a good shot at it than have a new tree put in and then have something run over by construction equipment.
right. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
I think we're gonna have a conversation at the board level, so we may ask you for if we have any additional questions or some insight, Tim, so, thank you. So what's the?
David had his hand up just one last time.
Oh, one last thing, David?
I hope you'll indulge this because this is a total other topic. And that is This is an absolutely dreadful communication situation. You've just had a private conversation with Tim that the rest of us could not hear, and I'm sure he was saying something substantive and important. I suspect Tim was saying something substantive and important. Did you hear it?
No.
No. You have to do something. I'm sorry, but
Okay.
you, okay? And since communication is what I really do in life, though I'm long retired, I'd be happy to help in what way I could.
Okay.
But this really, you can't go on with this because this is a just, it doesn't work.
Okay, thank you, David. So what Tim has
Actually, you know
said,
something? We used to have the microphone over there, didn't we? And that way people could really participate a little easier. So we'll have to ask Matt if for some reason something's not picking it up when we used to have it over there.
Yeah.
For that reason, we used to have it over there. So I agree, Dave. We'll find
Okay.
out.
You and could see the audience.
Yeah, it's better. It's better. Yeah, for
Yeah.
some reason that's become, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree.
okay. So Tim, I'm gonna just, and if I misspeak, I need you to correct me. So what Tim was saying to everyone was that there is, the upper green and the lower green, they removed a tree there. There's a plan in place there's a plan in place to replace the tree that came down on the upper green, that's close to the road. There's, a plan to replace the Christmas tree. And what is going on at the lower green?
The lower green right now by the schoolhouse, there are two trees that we're looking at. One of them's an ash. When I first looked at it, it looked like pruning would be probably the answer. The way it's looking now, it may have to be removed. Further down, if you're coming in off of Newman, you get a little bit further down, there's a couple of trees there that need to be pruned up.
Okay,
And I think that'll take care of those, but if we have to replace a tree on the lower green, it would follow the same listing of native trees that the committee came up with for replacing trees on the upper and the lower green.
okay. So there is a plan in place to replace, too many place words. A plan in place to replace the trees that have come down. And Cottage Road, I asked specifically about Cottage Road, and the woman that lives on Cottage Road offered to replace a tree that has already come down, but they're going to wait until the heavy equipment is off of her property to give the tree a best chance of survival, so that the equipment doesn't run over the roots. So that's what Tim discussed with us. So now I'm gonna actually change it to the board. So what is the feeling of the board? Who wants to go first? Don't all jump in at the same time.
These 8 trees in particular, I'm not a tree expert. I grew up on High Road, and I was going through Bushy's Field when I was 10 years old. And I'm talking the one that's off of Newman, the long road that goes across the marsh and goes up into that field up there. I used to play in that field a long, long time ago. So, and if anybody looks at my house lot, when I built my house, I didn't clear cut anything. And it still looks that way today, and I have branches falling all over the place. So believe me when I say I like trees. These 8 in particular, I'm just wondering if the fallback on this isn't because of all the other trees that are marked on Newman Road that we don't know what their demise is going to be, and is that a problem?
Well, I think the trees that are marked on Newman Road, I think I need to clarify.
I know they did
some.
not have to go through the appeal process.
Well,
Nobody-
no, the only ones that have been appeal are these 8, but the other trees that are not these 8 that have a red X on them, they're slated to come down.
I understand, right.
So there's gonna be a lot of trees coming down on Newman Road, and personally, I have a concern. I mean, I know these trees have to come down because they're dangerous and they're dead and all of that. But I do have a concern about how that's gonna change the look of that road.
Tim, what is the timeframes? You alluded to the fact that once the appeal period has gone through, what are we looking for? Because we have, and then I want to speak to an issue that maybe I'd like to address, because we have other trees on private property that will take maybe a year to take down, or 2 years to take down.
What do you mean by on private
When,
property?
when do we have to take trees like the 8 trees that are slated to be taken down from the fence going into Bushy Field to the parking lot? When do we have to proceed to take these down?
Once you have the public hearing, let's, for just a second, say that nobody appealed it at all. Those trees were slated to be pruned or come down. Once you have the public hearing, then literally the next day you can start working on it. Once it's appealed, then that puts a hold on that until voted on by the board as to which trees should come down, which trees can stand, whatever you want to vote on. The only thing that I will tell you is that once trees are deemed to be dangerous, if that tree comes down and lands on somebody's car, or lands on somebody walking there, riding a bicycle. When I was there a couple of times, there was a lady pushing a baby carriage. If that tree comes down and injures somebody, the town is totally responsible at that point. We know that trees are dangerous in town. Once they're determined to be dangerous, if the town decides not to act on it, the fact that we identified them as dangerous and we don't take them down, then the town becomes liable for lawsuits that would come up from it. As I understand it, and I wish Lisa was still here, she might be able to answer the question, but if the town doesn't know per se that it's not dangerous, then I think the town has limited liability on it, if I remember right.
That's correct. That's correct. I'm an attorney. That is the standing,
Okay.
yeah.
So, if we know that we have trees in town that are dangerous, and
We do nothing, then we get sued, we've lost. We've got no,
Right.
we've got no defense.
Yeah.
And the defense is always, oh, the town didn't know the pothole was there that blew out your transmission.
but if you have a public hearing on
Yeah.
pothole repairs in the town of Newbury, then it would be a different story.
Exactly, yeah.
So, I'm just, like I said, there's a lot of trees in town. We could hire outside contractors to do some of the work. All the stuff that is along the electrical lines from, I wanna say it's somewhere in the street number 30s back towards, the lower green. We're gonna have to hire somebody to take and do even pruning on those, because the wires that are there and stuff, it's gonna be very difficult to do. Our guys are not qualified to do that. And so it would just be that there's all kinds of tree services that are trained in doing that, and we've used them in the past where, power lines come into play. So there's trees along that side. If you're coming in from the lower green, it would be mostly trees on the right-hand side going up. That would be that would have to be either pruned / removed, whatever it works out to be.
Thank you.
Because what I was thinking of would be, I thought Peter made a very good statement when he was talking about phasing things in and being able to do them in steps. And guys, let me say this to you. In 2009, I had a year-old truck, and it was a 3/4 ton Dodge, and it was brand new. And I was driving down Route 1, and a 70-foot tree fell on the windshield, and the windshield was this far from my face and totaled the truck. And so if I should be one that wants to take every tree down that's near a road. And I am absolutely the antithesis of this, just because of, you know, what I consider to be aesthetic. So I had one chance, so I figure I can save trees. I guess my question was, if the other trees are slated and have gone through the appeal that night, those other trees went through, the 21 trees went through the appeal too?
No, there's no appeal, it's just
They
these
didn't
8
ap-
trees.
they
Did you didn't, oh, so those other 21 trees on that street were not discussed at the appeal?
No, this is the appeal. He had the public hearing.
The public hearing, I mean,
Okay.
because the public hearing is what Timmy's talking about.
Yeah, he
When it
had the
goes through
public
public
hearing.
hearing, that's when the state law kicks in.
Well, he had the public hearing on the 31st of October, and he had the whole list of trees. He has one on Coleman
And they were
Road.
all the 21. What I'm suggesting is, and I don't know how to, but if it's gonna take years to take the other 21 down, why are we taking this 8 down immediately? I'm sure there's some that should come down. And I don't wanna put you on the, you know,
Well, I think the
and I don't
issue-
want the town to be liable.
The issue is, I could go contract different people and say, okay, these trees from the gate on back down, the ones that are marked with blue need to be pruned, the ones with an orange X need to be removed. And with how the tree services, the independent tree services, not the town's tree truck, could get in there and take them down in probably a week's time. They'd have to get, it's gonna take longer than that because you have to, because it's under the Pacheco law, then it has to go to the town accountant to look at it, to make sure that what the bid is for those trees meets the standards of the Pacheco law, that the people who are doing the work have the insurance to cover it, that all the paperwork has to be signed, and then those trees could be taken down. So realistically on that, it's probably a month and a half to get anything done on that.
So the trees that are further up the street are still on the town right away.
Correct, yeah. We
Uh-huh.
can't take anything
I get you.
down in
Right.
Massachusetts on private property, and trust
Yep.
me, half the calls I get are people who call, can you come out and take a look at a tree? And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but that's your tree. The town can't take it down.
Mm.
Well, why can't you take it down? It's state law. You know, the town can't take down trees on private property. It's just hard and fast how it is.
I'm done.
You good? So I think we,
May I, Madam Chair?
yes.
I'm gonna make this as short as possible. Some people in this room know me, and generally, I don't like change. I'm very sentimental to the way the town looks. If I could freeze it in time, I would. I've been out there 3 times to look at these trees. I love Newman Road like I love Scotland Road, like I love Orchard Street. Very important to me, these landscapes, very important. And every time I returned and looked at these trees, I stuck my neck out for the ones on Cottage Road because I felt like we could squeeze a little more life out of them. They're really important to the community. When I look at these trees, these 8, I'm focusing on these 8, not on the rest. We're here tonight to discuss these 8. They're in really bad shape. They're rotten, they're leaking, there's holes through them. They're hollow, and I went up the line and I said, and forgive me, because I know a lot of people say no tree is junk, but I went up the row and I started, I'm going 1, 2, 3, and I'm saying, oh, I'm finding these terribly compromised trees. I do some wood for myself. I know the danger of just felling a tree that's that compromised. You can get killed, they splinter. They're that bad. I hate to say it, I don't want to say it, and I didn't want to find that. Like, they're that bad. They're dangerous. Much like Jeff, not myself, my grandparents lived near Maudsley Pines. Well, around 1992, my grandfather had a pretty decent red Dodge pickup. I still remember it. I was about 12 or 13 years old. And one of those big limbs on one of those big pine trees that I'm sentimental to on Pine Hill Road come down, and it flattened the cab of the truck. It was a single cab Dodge truck. From the nose to the tailgate was flat like this table. He spent the better part of the year sitting in a chair with a halo on. How that guy didn't die, I have no idea. I got no idea. I don't even know how they got him out of the thing. You know, after, we kept the truck like it was a waste to get rid of it, but then we all realized no one had the stomach to do anything with the truck and it went. But it was a wreck. Secondly, I'm a farmer. One thing I recommend to everyone in the room is about a phased approach. Nature might do the phasing for us. So I recommend with these trees, we have some money in the tree fund. They absolutely need to be replanted. The species, I have no idea. That's not me. That's for others to decide. You know, maybe the abutters, the community, the species of the tree. But my recommendation would be to take down all 8 trees, remove the stumps like Mr. Thurlow said, so we can do a proper planting job, and replace them, because we need to plant a crop to get a crop. And even though most of us in this room, myself included, we won't live to see the final product, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't plant the crop so we have it in the end. We'll get that even look. I'm sure most of those trees are within a few years of each other in age, you know, if not roughly the same age. And it will be dramatic. It's gonna be tough for some of us, myself included, because like I said, I've visited these trees 3 times. I'm not thinking hard enough. I'm not being creative enough. Like, they're that bad. I hate to say it, but they're that bad. And I think to replant now, you know, we'll only see them through their juvenile years, but, you know, for later generations, I think it's important and that will help preserve the look of Newman Road, like, in 50 years. It'll be right back to, you know, hopefully where it was.
I that's kind of where I was going with this. I mean, the tree, I feel the trees have to come down. I think they're a hazard. I think they're dead. I think all of that. But I don't want to take these trees down without a plan to move forward and create that iconic road again. I should think we do a disservice to the town if we do.
We can't just cut them and leave it. That's not an option to me.
Right.
But I think also we have to talk to Peter somehow about getting them away from the road, maybe to more on your property. I don't know what that's gonna do to your wall or whatever, like David said, because if we plant them in the same spot, we're gonna be in the same trouble. Because you get the salts of the road and all those corrosive components, so.
Yeah, the soils are better there. I mean, obviously it complicates things if, you know, taxpayers are, you know, paying for trees to be planted on private property.
Yeah,
We'd be happy to
good catch.
have that conversation.
Good catch.
But not only that, if we, you know, maybe the trees have to be replaced and they'll have their useful life is not forever, but if we plant them back, farther back, you're gonna lose that iconic look when you come down.
Well,
Newman Road.
you're not talking that far. Just can't plant them right next to, so the roots go under the road again. It's crazy.
Well, I know, I just had to take 2 trees down
Tracy,
because
we've
of the
got,
driveway.
we've got a pretty good amount in that fund.
As of right now, we've got a little over 57,000.
That'll buy a few trees.
Well,
I
don't know.
I understand your train of thought, you know, to give them the utmost best chance of
Oh,
survival.
Peter's dead, right?
Yeah. Given the aesthetics of it, I would take the gamble on replacing the trees roughly where they are, on our side of the wall,
Yeah, I think they need to go on town property.
the town side of the wall.
Yeah, on the town, I'm not back, I mean, we could put them back as far as they could go. And again, heavy equipment and the runoff from the street, it's gonna affect the tree. But we'll keep that iconic look, that's just my feeling. Dana, what do you think?
I think they should stay on town property. If we're gonna replant the trees, I think they should stay on town property.
Right.
And they should be replanted.
What do you think about taking them down?
I think they need to come down. You know, JR hit it on the head. I went and looked at them too, and you know, there's not, I understand about, you know, the whole environmental impact and those, just talking about the environmental impact, you need to have green leaves to have environmental impact. And they aren't doing real well in that category.
Poison ivy has the green leaves.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
so,
Sorry, I have to disagree with that. Those trees are, relatively speaking,
incredibly healthy in view of the battle that they're all waging. It's, the canopy down there is really quite incredible, which makes it the icon that it is. And I think, I think the phased approach, for heaven's sake, is the way to do this. One of the things is, I'm very delighted that you all went down there, but did you notice the distance between the traveled way, meaning the road, and the wall gets smaller and
Yes.
smaller? Okay, if you're gonna take those trees out, you're going to affect the wall for one thing. You're also going to create a situation where I would be prepared to bet you cannot plant replacement trees with any confident expectation that they survive in some of the places, not all. And to answer your question about the 27 trees, okay, the trees that are along Newman Road are most of them in the area where there is a power line. And therefore, they are really a separate issue, and many of them are, in fact, visibly dangerous. My reasons for objecting to the 8 essentially was because there were very few reasons stated at the public hearing about why they had to come down, a number of other things. So, yes, they are a danger, yes, eventually they have to go, but in the 30-plus years I've been out there, there have only been a couple of occasions when I've found large enough limbs on the road to prevent vehicles passing. Now, I'm not there every day and all the rest of it, but it's not a death alley, for heaven's sake. It really isn't. It has now much higher visitation to the property because of COVID and the fact that people in the area have discovered it. So from that point of view, yes. But don't run away because the town's liable. The town's liable for all kinds of things that are far worse than that, really.
So, as far as, another, well, Jerry?
Yeah, I went down there and just last month, a very small branch of a very tall tree came down on my property and it took out part of my fence. And, last year, we cut down 8 trees and they were on my property. Because they were dead and they were, well, when my husband traded his car in, the salesman asked about the dimples on his hood. And it's like, oh, those are from the branches that fall down from the dead trees. So, and some of these branches are 30 inches in diameter. If they ever come down, I think they will kill someone. And the fact that we've had this meeting, we can't deny that we didn't know that they were dangerous. So, it's kind of almost strict liability for the town.
Jeff, do you have any comment?
And I live in the house that Longfellow's grandfathers worked as a blacksmith under the spreading chestnut tree. And sadly, I just have the stump of the chestnut tree and it's in bad shape. So, I love trees, I really do, but
Well, I think it's incumbent upon us to replace the
Dangerous,
trees or come up with a
Yes,
plan
yes.
and not destroy that iconic look as you go in. So, there are 8 trees here. Do we want to discuss them one at a time? Do we want to go through them? Do we want to, or are we comfortable just saying that all 8 of these have to go?
I regrettably say they have to go. I wish there was another way.
And Dana?
I do think I think that these 8 trees have to go. I think that we do need to aggressively address landscape design, different roads, and maybe getting a committee together so that the shock and awe doesn't take place like it is right here tonight.
Thank you. Jerry?
I agree with Dana, yeah. Definitely come up with some kind of a replacement or replanting timeline. if nothing else.
Jeff?
I'm still caught on the fact that, I mean, I think it's like 1 and 2, I mean, those certainly are the least of the trees that are probably gonna cause any damage because they're not very tall. But it seems to me those trees are definitely in peril, but I look at some of the trees there and I went down there probably, I can remember going down on my motorcycle and looking, so it was warm. When you get way up top, some of those limbs aren't even that big. The leaders can be, I don't know, I would probably, I wish there was a way when we ship something out to someone, because Tim's doing a very good job for us in our town, and we ship it out to someone else, and he's obviously asked to do a task that the liability for his company is gonna be, I have to take these trees down. So, I mean, he can, very rarely will you get someone like this that'll come back and say, well, I think you can save 1 or 2. So,
I think there are 8 trees here.
I wish I could visualize them enough, and maybe 3 or 4 of them right down towards where the wall, towards the parking lot that creates the canopy, because half of the canopy's gone the other way, could be kept for a while, but if they can't, and I understand the liability for the town, then
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with this. So there's some of these trees that are just, it should be removed before it fails, okay? But then there's some that should be removed due to the level of decline in the high target potential. So a high target potential means it's got a good chance of hitting the street, right, Tim?
Right, yeah, they're big enough that if they fall, they're either gonna go into the bushy field, but the way most of them are growing, it's gonna come out into the road.
Yeah. So there's a few of these trees. I think tree number 4 is one, tree number 5 is one.
and it's 6 or 7.
Yeah, potential to the public, high risk potential is number 6. High risk of hitting the road is 7. You know, potential target includes Newman Road, 8. So I think there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If we could start with those.
We need to focus on the 8, because that's what
Yeah,
tonight is.
well, that's what the 8, all 8. And then the last 3, maybe, you know, do those at the end, but get the ones that are high risk to the town down first, is what I'm thinking. And then come back with these other 3. But in the meantime, we need to have a plan on what we're gonna plant.
Okay, Madam Chair?
Yes,
May I ask a question of an audience member?
please.
I'm sorry, I forgot your name, from trustees.
Peter.
Peter, could you come up to the mic?
Sure.
And thanks for coming tonight. If the board decided to vote to remove the trees and replace them, would you or the trustees or a representative from the trustees be willing to work with the tree warden to select an appropriate species with the right colors and the features that you would want for that area going forward?
Yes, yes.
I think that's very important.
Yep, we'd be happy to participate in the process.
And also, I know you mentioned maybe being able to find some volunteers to water.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about that. I mean, and in concert with, you know, with Tim and the town, we could probably come up with an effective watering schedule.
Tim, would that approach work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to want to go towards the listing of the trees that we got at the upper and lower green advisory committee. Those are natives, so to me, getting the appropriate tree to go into particular spots, that would be the best way to go, because they're gonna have the best chance of surviving. The issue is that there's some of these trees that are literally of the age, some of them are inches off the
Understood.
lifetime. So we would have to push those back in order to give those trees a chance. We'd have to meet with the trustees or a representative to say, okay, what if we planted here? And this is the tree, this is the ultimate height of it, this is gonna be the fall coloration of it. It's not, in my humble opinion, gonna be all exactly the same type of tree. a monoculture of, say, red maples or, why can't I think of all the trees that are on that list? I should have brought it with me. There are a bunch of trees.
We could identify a species of tree that would reflect what's there currently.
Or several species.
Even if it is one species of tree, if it maintains if you can't work with it, that's okay, just say so.
The red maples would be, call it the closest to that. So we could put all red maples in there, but again, they have that big root system that you're gonna find in the Norways. And so if we replace it all with red maples, we're kicking the can down the road 25 years or 50 years for whomever the tree warden is and whoever the board is to deal with, okay, we just planted those 25 years ago, and now the trees are starting to fall apart, they're starting to fail. I think there's sections there where between the stone wall and the road, there's not a big space to put anything in there.
Okay, I tried. I tried.
Yeah.
So,
All we can do is the best we can do.
Alicia,
Yes?
where the wall gets narrow, Peter, down towards the parking lot and the trees are stuffed in, is that where it is?
Yes.
That is absolutely the trustees, so the town doesn't own like 15 feet to the side no matter what? Because that's where the road went in when it was narrower and wandered down through. So
No,
that's,
there's every historical
because that makes it,
indication.
that's gonna make it hard, like Peter said,
Yeah.
to plant trees that are on private property.
The right of way is probably actually
Yep.
expanded over time.
Yep. Yep.
Because that was never a through road originally.
Okay, can I make a suggestion or a motion?
Yes.
Okay. I move that the town remove the 8 trees in question tonight and and have a liaison from the select board, work with the trustees, or a representative from the trustees to select a variety that will do the best it can
In conjunction with the tree warden?
in conjunction with the tree warden.
Is there a second?
Jerry seconded.
Okay, any discussion? Do we like that approach?
I think it's the best approach we have. I just reread on all 8 trees. I just reread the recommendations of all 8 trees. I had a really hard time in reading those recommendations of any of those trees that we would be able to save.
Yeah, I don't think. they're
Based
stable.
on
Right.
the one-line recommendation for each tree. That they're slightly different, but I don't see how any of them, the ones that look the best, actually, he says, have got the highest risk of falling on the street. So.
So I think everything we heard tonight, or the majority of what we heard tonight, there was really no argument to not take those trees down. It was do something to protect that iconic view and have a plan and how to move forward and, I think honestly, the town, as Tim had said, we've had a very limited tree budget for many, many years. We had a lot of things that weren't quite well for a lot of years. We had I could go back and about the DPW building that was condemned. I mean, there's a lot of things that the town has come a long way. We're catching up with the trees now. I think we need to move in that direction, continue to move in that direction, but add the additional piece of, the tree warden will identify trees, town oak trees that need to come down. Well, where's the replacement side of it? We need to start balancing that, because we'll lose the beauty that is Newbury, and I don't, like JR said, I do not want to lose that. I think it's important.
We also need to be planting for the future.
Right.
Is the tree committee idea that a few of us have suggested something you could consider in the future?
Absolutely. You're welcome. Leslie, you want to come up? Yes.
3-year plan, a 5-year plan, stuff like that, so that everything's not a surprise.
Yeah.
Leslie Matthews, 111 Main Street. There was a tree committee that did a whole study on the Upper Green and made many suggestions, as Tim has already said. They were very invested into it. They really looked into it, and they made great suggestions and presentations to the board on how to bring back the Upper Green. Can you get these people back together again, since they've already invested so much time into it?
Well, that was focused on the Upper Green. This has to be a town-wide approach. But, yeah, we're just
But
gonna
they've,
put
I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, they already have a few steps forward in what is expected of them.
Yeah, when we form the committee, and we'll have to do a lot of thinking about that, but when we call for people, absolutely. They know the call, they know the drill.
Yeah,
May I inquire when the committee was active?
it was before COVID.
They did give a report to the
They
town.
they did, and then they had a great presentation. They showed all of the trees that would do well for the Upper Green. They explained how to set them back further so that, you know, salt and sand and, you know, regular runoff wouldn't destroy the roots of them. So they really had a
Fred, were
great.
you on that committee? Yeah, Fred was on that committee.
Yeah.
So there was.
Lon was there.
Lon, you were on that committee, yeah, so.
Robin, is he here still?
Robin.
Robin was on that committee, yeah.
So.
Oh, thank you, Leslie.
There were a lot of people
Yeah.
that, they already have a step forward on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Come on. Yeah,
Up here?
yeah.
Lon Hockmeister. Here's a suggestion. So we're gonna make some empty space on that road.
Mm-hmm.
Let's run an experiment. I'm a scientist. Let's run an experiment, put a couple different trees in, so 1 year from now, when we meet again, we won't say, geez, I wonder which kind of tree can survive next to the road. Put a couple in and
This
see if
spring.
they're here next year.
This spring, you mean?
Yeah, right, yeah, you can't buy now, but I mean,
Right.
what I'm getting at is, let's, as we begin this, let's try to answer some questions.
Thank you.
And Lon, I think what you brought up about maintaining those trees is far more key than probably choosing the right 5 species. We've really gotta have some maintenance involved. We have to
Oh, I was over
water.
there, Jim was over there.
Do they make such a thing as like a bag? Maybe
Yes, they
Tim,
do.
that you can-
Newburyport uses them
We
with
had
water.
the bags, but the bags have to be filled. And we ran a hose from the house on the south end of the green, a hard rubber hose, all the way up to the Greenbelt property. And then we went out there twice a week, and every tree got 10 to 15 minutes in addition to those bags. And if it rained, we didn't have to do it. We didn't lose one tree. These were big tree transplants. These were big. I think they might have been taller than what I said. I was asking Jim if he could remember, but they were big. The root ball was, they came in with this gigantic thing that just goes and picks the whole tree up.
Tree spade.
Yeah, and they dropped them in, they put the hole in, they dropped them in the hole, we watered them, and.
Thank you.
Every one of them lived.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Lon.
thank you,
We have a
Lon.
motion on the table.
Yeah, and we have a second, and we have discussion. Let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Did you want to have a
I
question?
just was wondering, I wanted to reiterate the motion, but I think I remember what it was.
Yeah.
Aye.
Jerry, you?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, so it's unanimous, Julie.
Yes.
So.
Do we want to select a liaison?
We can tonight if you want, but I just have a quick question for Tim. Tim, I know you've been kind of, doing a really good job at identifying all these trees. How many trees are there slated to come down? Because I'm a little concerned now about the repercussions of what we're gonna hear all over town.
You mean on Newman Road itself?
Well, I wanna know just how many trees are
No,
gonna come down.
town-wide, she meant, Tim.
Yeah, no, townwide.
Well, National Grid, from the Highfield station out to Middle, up Orchard, across to Elm, Central, down to School school down to Elm and out to Route 1.
They're gonna do that whole,
Yeah, there's 42 town trees, and the total, I believe, is 72 altogether, which would include trees that are on private property that the homeowners have agreed to
Okay.
allow them to take down.
How about state highways and state, like Route 1 and
If
Route
it's
1A?
on Route 1 or 1A, then Mass DOT is the only one who can take down trees along there. Which they've been doing that, and what I don't understand, quite honestly, is they're leaving these giant tree trunks sitting there that are maybe 12 feet tall on the side of the road. And it's like, well, why in God's name would you do that? That makes absolutely no sense. But that's just the issue, that it's not anything we can get into if Mass DOT is doing it that way.
Okay, do you want to
All right.
select a liaison tonight or at a future meeting?
I don't mind selecting one tonight.
I'm
Any
willing to do the task.
volunteers? Thank you, JR. Anybody opposed? Anybody else want it?
I do.
It's all yours. I move that we appoint J.R. Colby as the liaison to the trees, to the tree warden, to act on behalf of the board when selecting trees. And the committee will wait on the committee. This is just
Second.
appointing you as a liaison. Okay,
Second.
And
confounded.
this would be just for these 8 trees. This is just what we're focused on.
Or Newman Road. right.
Oh, okay.
Newman Road, right.
You mean to identify and plant and
I'm
move forward?
focused on these 8 trees tonight.
Okay,
All this
yeah.
other stuff's just noise because it's not on the agenda. We have
we'll
8
just-
trees.
Yeah, but I mean, if you
Trees for
wanna
Newman
work with
Road.
removing those 8 trees and then finding a path forward with those 8 trees.
Absolutely,
Okay,
in consultation with the trustees, so there's an appropriate, and the tree warden,
And the
so
tree
an
warden,
appropriate
yeah.
compromise can be met that
I
suits Newman Road
I
far
will
into the
second
future.
that, I will second that. Yes,
I have one question of Mr. Lamprey. You talk about, trees that are on private property. However, if a tree is within, is it 15 or 10 feet of the road? What's,
In
what is that?
Newbury, there are very few boundaries. Stone walls are a good indication.
Okay.
The stone walls have been there a long time. Somebody put those on their property line to say, hey, this is my land. Some of them you can find the granite markers, but I've found granite markers back up into people's yards by 20 feet. And it's like, well, that's the property line. So technically, the town owns this far off, but I've also seen down on Moody Street, a guy called me and he said, oh, gee, this tree, it needs to come down. And I said, do you have any kind of a plan so we can find the markers? And he brought out the plan, he had it surveyed, and I looked, and I found a granite marker. And it's about 3 feet off the edge of the pavement. That, anything back from beyond that is his. So there's no 10 feet, 15 feet, you just have to go out there and spend the time trying to find where the markers are, stone walls. If somebody had a certified plot plan, that would make life so much easier, because with a certified plot plan, as opposed to call it a mortgage plan, then you'd know where the boundaries are on all these things, and you'd know, which ones are private property and which ones are town trees.
Okay, I thought the rule was if it's within, I thought 15 feet of the pavement, the town, while it's not the town's property, it's considered a town tree, and the town had the right to cut that or prune that tree if it was dead or damaged.
I mean, if there's a limb that's hanging out over the road and it's broken off,
Yeah.
then the town can cut it back to the property line. Not pretty, but that's as far as we can go.
There's nothing in chapter 87 of the kind that you're talking about, which is what governs this. The one thing is the first statement, section 1 of chapter 87, basically says if there's a confusion that cannot be resolved about where the property line is, the assumption is that the tree belongs to the town.
Okay.
Okay, and that's clear statement. What I think Tim said earlier maybe gave you a false impression, and that is the town could take a tree down on somebody's property if the person is asking the town to do it. And the town is willing to do so. What the town cannot do is go onto someone's private property and take a tree down which they cannot demonstrate is a danger to public welfare.
Okay,
So it's a bit different.
okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
One quick question to Tim. Tim, what's our responsibility to really answer National Grid?
National Grid, they took me out, we started at Highfield, we went down.
Was that a certified arborist too? Do you remember?
Yes.
It was?
Yeah, he was. He went down, he marked the trees. None of them that I can see are, well, gee, it would be really nice to, do something here. Those he actually has marked for pruning, to get the branches away
Yep.
from the power lines. There's a lot of trees that are out there that, along that stretch, that are kind of leaning at an angle like this. There's, especially up Orchard, there's some washout sections where you can see the exposed tree trunks, tree roots, I'm sorry, that tree is gonna come down at some point in time. So any of the trees that are on private property, he talked to the property owners sign off on them. If you come up Orchard, you'll see some on the left-hand side and some on the right-hand side. There's one that's right at the corner of the back driveway of Triton. It's an elm that I think they talked with Bud about taking that one down. And last year there was no leaves on it, basically, so it's.
That elm lasted a long time.
Yeah, considering all the stuff that's happened, there's some further down on Elm Street, if you go down, like beyond, Caldwell Farms and Adlin Road, there's some right in there on the right-hand side and some on the left-hand side that are marked to come down. But all of those are just trees that should have been addressed years ago, either by the town or by the homeowner, but you can't force a homeowner to take down a tree.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Did you do
Motion
an all
to-
in favor for the, you had a first and a second, but you didn't.
Oh, we need to vote on appointing you.
You did a first and a second, you just didn't do.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you,
Motion
Julie,
to
for catching
adjourn.
that.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Third.
Aye.
Aye.